What if the reason life keeps breaking you is because you haven't yet discovered the one truth that cannot be shaken? Think about that for a moment. Not the truth your emotions tell you, not the truth your situation screams at you, not the truth your past keeps whispering, but the truth that comes from God Himself, steady, unmoving, unchanging, because the truth you stand on determines whether you crumble or rise. And many people don't fall because they are weak. They fall because they are standing on the wrong foundation. Years ago, I met a young woman who looked like life had crushed every part of her. She had been betrayed by the people she trusted the most, lost a job she depended on, and felt as if God had abandoned her. Every day she woke up hoping things would change, but instead, the weight increased. One day she told me, "I think I'm breaking." But something powerful happened. She stopped asking God to remove the pain and started asking Him for wisdom in the pain. Slowly, her eyes opened. She began to see purpose in the very things she once hated. She realized some doors closed because God was redirecting her. She understood that some people left because God was protecting her. She discovered that sometimes God allows shaking to remove what cannot stand so He can reveal what must remain. That shift, just that shift, became the beginning of her breakthrough. She didn't get stronger first. She got wiser. And wisdom gave her strength. Gradually, she learned what Proverbs chapter 4, verse 7 says. Wisdom is the principal thing. Not emotion, not speed, not connections, not achievements. Wisdom. The Bible didn't say wisdom is an optional thing, a secondary thing, or a convenient thing. It says wisdom is the principal thing, meaning everything rises or collapses based on the quality of wisdom you operate with. If you have wisdom, you navigate storms differently. If you have wisdom, you interpret disappointments correctly. If you have wisdom, you stop breaking under pressure because you finally understand what the season is doing in your life. That young woman didn't escape pain, she outgrew it because she embraced God's wisdom. And once she embraced it, nothing could break her the same way again. Likewise, you must understand this. There is a level of understanding in God that makes you unbreakable, not because life becomes easy, but because your spirit becomes anchored. When God opens your eyes, when He gives you divine perspective, when He trains your heart to interpret life the way He sees it, you develop a strength that circumstances cannot crush. You begin to walk with a sense of clarity, certainty, and peace that confuses the enemy. You stop reacting like a victim and start responding like someone who knows exactly who is guiding their steps. Because when wisdom enters, darkness loses its power. Furthermore, this message you're about to hear is not just information, it is preparation. It is alignment. It is a divine invitation for you to rise. For the next few minutes, I want your heart open, your spirit alert, and your mind ready, because God is about to give you an understanding that will reposition your destiny. The purpose of this message is simple: to help you stand strong, productive, focused, and aligned with God's plan for your life, no matter what tries to break you. By the time this journey is over, you will not just feel encouraged, you will carry wisdom that transforms. The kind of wisdom that lifts, stabilizes, and empowers. The kind of wisdom that makes a person truly unshakable. Most people don't collapse because their battles are bigger than them. They collapse because their understanding is smaller than what they are facing. And this is why so many hearts bend under pressure, why so many dreams die halfway, why so many people live discouraged, confused, and overwhelmed. They are fighting life with emotions instead of revelation. They are navigating storms with feelings instead of spiritual truth. And feelings, no matter how loud, no matter how real, were never designed to carry the weight of destiny. One reason people break so easily is because they lack spiritual understanding. When you don't understand what God is doing, everything feels like an attack. Every delay feels like rejection. Every challenge feels like punishment. Every closed door feels like failure. Without understanding, life feels random, painful, unfair, like a puzzle with missing pieces. But when God gives you insight, when He opens your spiritual eyes, when He gives you revelation, suddenly the same things that once broke you begin to make sense. You stop panicking over seasons that are meant to shape you. You stop misinterpreting the silence of God. You stop assuming that pain means abandonment. Spiritual understanding doesn't remove storms, but it makes you stable in the middle of them. Similarly, many people depend on feelings rather than divine truth, and feelings are fragile. They rise and fall like waves. One moment you feel strong, the next you feel defeated. One moment you feel loved, the next you feel abandoned. One moment you feel confident, the next you feel insecure. When you build your life on emotions, you become unstable. But truth, God's truth, is consistent. It doesn't change because of circumstances. It doesn't shift because of pressure. It doesn't bend because of storms. Truth anchors you. Truth steadies you. Truth gives you direction. Truth gives you identity. Feelings may shake you, but truth keeps you standing. Another reason people break is because they define their entire life through the lens of pain instead of purpose. Pain is real, yes. Pain is heavy, yes. But pain is not the whole story. When you interpret your life only through what hurt you, you lose sight of who God is making you. When you see yourself only through trauma, you forget that God uses even broken pieces to build masterful stories. Some people are stuck because they keep rehearsing wounds instead of discovering wisdom. They keep magnifying the suffering instead of identifying the shaping. Pain becomes dangerous when it becomes your identity, not your teacher. Let me show you something. I've met people who were strong, gifted, full of potential, but they crumbled simply because they lacked spiritual grounding. One lost his business and immediately concluded that God hated him. Another was betrayed and assumed he was cursed. Another experienced delays and thought his destiny was over. Their circumstances weren't the real problem. Their interpretation was. Two people can go through the same fire. One comes out stronger while the other collapses. The difference is understanding. The difference is truth. The difference is wisdom. This is why Hosea chapter 4 verse 6 becomes so painfully relevant. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge, not for lack of strength, not for lack of prayer, not for lack of potential, not for lack of opportunity, but for lack of knowledge, lack of understanding, lack of revelation, lack of clarity. Ignorance is more dangerous than any attack the enemy can plan, because what you don't understand can break you. But what you understand through God can never defeat you again. There comes a moment in every person's life when they begin to realize that the greatest strength they could ever carry is not physical power, not emotional stamina, and not even financial security. It is wisdom, God's wisdom. Because wisdom is not just information, it is a shield. It is a divine defense system that preserves your heart, your mind, and your destiny. And the moment you begin to see life through the lens of God's wisdom, everything begins to change. What once overwhelmed you begins to lose its power. What once confused you becomes clearer. What once made you fearful becomes manageable. Because wisdom gives you a new set of eyes. Consequently, this is the unbreakable truth I want you to grasp. God's wisdom is a shield. When you operate with wisdom, you interpret life differently. You understand people differently. You respond to situations differently. Wisdom turns panic into strategy. It turns fear into perspective. It turns confusion into clarity. Wisdom doesn't remove the storm, but it equips you to navigate it without sinking. When the enemy cannot confuse you, he cannot defeat you. This is why a person who walks in wisdom stands unshaken even when everything around them is shaking. Think about Joseph. He had every reason to break. Sold by his brothers, lied on, imprisoned unjustly, forgotten by people he helped, yet he never turned bitter, never lost focus, never lost the sense of God's hand guiding his story. Why? Because wisdom preserved him. Wisdom kept him from reacting emotionally. Wisdom kept him from interpreting betrayal as abandonment. Wisdom kept him anchored to God's purpose, even when the process didn't make sense. And that same wisdom positioned him for elevation. You see, wisdom protects you from yourself as much as it protects you from others. It keeps your heart from becoming polluted. It keeps your mind from becoming overwhelmed. It keeps your decisions from becoming reckless. It keeps your destiny from being wasted. The Bible confirms this in Proverbs chapter 24, verse 5, where it says, "A wise man is strong, not a talented man, not a wealthy man, not a physically powerful man, a wise man. Strength is not first in the muscles, it is first in the mind, aligned with God." In fact, many people look strong on the outside but collapse in private because they lack the inner strength that comes from wisdom. When you don't understand what God is doing, every disappointment becomes a reason to quit. But when wisdom enters your life, you begin to see the fingerprints of God in what used to look like chaos. You begin to say, maybe this rejection is redirection. Maybe this delay is protection. Maybe this discomfort is development. Wisdom helps you interpret your life the way heaven interprets it. Furthermore, when you embrace the wisdom of God, you stop asking, why is this happening to me? And you start asking, Lord, what are you trying to show me through this? One question leads to frustration, the other leads to transformation. One question keeps you stuck, the other brings you into clarity. One question breaks you. And here is the truth. Once you begin to see through God's eyes, nothing can break you the same way again. Not because storms disappear, but because your understanding rises. And when your understanding rises, your strength rises with it. This is the power of divine wisdom. This is what God wants to plant in your spirit today. As we move deeper, it becomes impossible to talk about wisdom without talking about seasons. One of the greatest sources of unnecessary heartbreak is the inability to understand the timing of God. Most people are not broken because God failed them. They are broken because they assumed God should move according to their calendar. But destiny does not obey human deadlines. God works in seasons. And until you understand that rhythm, life will always feel confusing. Interestingly, when the Bible says in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 1, to everything there is a season, it is not giving poetry. It is giving strategy. It means every blessing has its appointed time. Every breakthrough has its scheduled arrival. Every elevation has its divine date. Seasons are God's way of protecting you, preparing you, and positioning you. And when you don't understand seasons, you start fighting battles that are unnecessary and losing peace that should have been preserved. For example, many people break because they expect harvest in planting season. They want visibility while God is still building them in secret. They want applause when God is still training their character. They want speed when God is still teaching them depth. And because they don't understand this, they get frustrated, discouraged, and emotionally drained. But wisdom teaches you that if God has you in a planting season, no amount of crying, complaining, or comparing will turn it into a harvest season. You must align with the season. In the same way, David's story becomes one of the clearest illustrations. He was anointed as king as a young boy, yet he wasn't crowned until many years later. Most people would have gotten angry, impatient, or discouraged. But David understood something many of us miss. Being chosen is not the same as being ready. God can show you your future today, but still take you through a long process before you walk in it. And if you don't understand that process, you will interpret delay as denial. David didn't do that. Wisdom kept him stable. Wisdom kept him serving. Wisdom kept him humble. Wisdom kept him patient. He knew that if God started the story, God would finish it. Likewise, there are moments when life feels slow, not because God forgot you, but because God is forming you. There are seasons when people exit your life, not because you are unworthy, but because God is protecting what He is building. There are times when doors will not open, not because you lack potential, but because it is not yet time. When you understand seasons, you stop panicking, you stop comparing, you stop doubting, you begin to trust the divine order over your life. Moreover, wisdom teaches you something very important. Not all slow seasons are punishment, some are preparation. Not all battles are attacks, some are transitions. Not all closed doors are losses, some are redirections. And once you grasp this, your heart becomes still. Your mind becomes clear. Your spirit becomes anchored, because seasons are no longer confusing. They become meaningful. And here is the truth. Nothing strengthens a person like understanding what God is doing in their season. When you know you're being trained, you don't break. When you know you're being prepared, you don't quit. When you know you're being shaped, you don't panic. Understanding seasons is one of the greatest forms of wisdom that makes a person unbreakable. Now let's talk about something that most people dread but cannot avoid: pain, pressure, and process. Many look at hardship as an enemy, a punishment, a personal attack. Yet the truth is far more profound. God does not waste pain, and He does not inflict pressure without purpose. Every trial you face, every challenge that seems unbearable, is actually part of a process designed to shape your destiny. The problem is, most people interpret pressure incorrectly. They see it as breaking rather than building. They see it as limitation rather than preparation. Take a moment and consider Joseph. He endured betrayal by his own family, was sold into slavery, falsely accused and imprisoned. If anyone had reason to break, it was him. Yet, he didn't. Why? Because he understood that God was using every difficulty to prepare him for a destiny far greater than he could imagine.